Never in the course of American history has it been this terrifyingly effortless to become homeless in New York City. One missed paycheck, one rent hike, one unexpected hospital bill, and just like that, everything you built vanishes. You go from tenant to transient, from neighbor to nuisance. One day, you live on the 6th floor. Next, you're sleeping 6 inches from the curb. And the city? It just keeps moving. Did you ever imagine there'd be places in New York so hollowed out, so ignored, that even law enforcement won't step in? Not out of fear of violence, but out of resignation. Because what can you really do when the system itself has broken? Once this city was the beacon, a place of ambition, electricity, and promise. Now, just blocks away from Broadway and Wall Street, you'll find encampments hidden under scaffolding, crushed dreams bundled into shopping carts, the cardboard turned into shelter, and silence. Not the kind that heals, the kind that forgets. In this documentary, we're stepping past the skyline, past the curated Instagram moments and the city's billion-dollar facade. We're walking into New York that no postcard dares to show, not for shock, not for pity, but to understand what happens when a city stops seeing its people. Because in this version of New York, hope isn't gone, it's just harder to hear. Let's begin. New York has never looked glossier on screen. In ads and movies, it's all penthouses and possibilities. But step outside the frame and reality hits harder than ever. The city has never felt so brutally cold. Right now, in one of the richest cities on earth, more than 350,000 people have no stable roof over their heads. Every night, over 130,000 are crammed into shelters, many of which are overflowing and understaffed. And for the rest, there's the street, the station, the sidewalk, whatever sliver of safety they can find. What's even more harrowing is how fast this crisis is escalating. It's not a slow leak, it's a burst pipe flooding every borough. And the faces of this emergency, they're aging. Many are seniors, once workers, builders, citizens who paid their dues, paid their taxes, and now pay the price for a system that forgot them. In Brooklyn, tents bloom like weeds between crumbling buildings. In Manhattan, luxury high-rises tower over sleeping bags. The smell of urine, the sight of discarded shoes, the quiet hum of suffering. It all blends into the background of daily life. And this isn't just happening in the margins. Even Central Park, the crown jewel of the city and Broadway, the world stage, are being pulled into the gravity of this slow collapse. How does a city with the economic power of a small country allow this to unfold? How does the same New York that gave birth to Wall Street, Fashion Week, and Pulitzer Prizes become a place where human beings are treated like debris? If the American dream once began in New York, it may now be dying here too. If America has a pulse, it beats from Manhattan, the skyline, the stock exchange. The stories are written in theater lights and told beneath towering glass spires. For generations, this island has symbolized ambition, a place where dreams were made, fortunes built, and culture defined. But today, just steps from Times Square, that dream is cracking. And if you walk far enough off the main avenue, the reality will leave you stunned. People sleep curled on stoops, shelter beneath scaffolding, and line subway platforms with nowhere else to go. Survival here isn't just a struggle, it's a nightly war over sidewalk space and street corners. According to recent findings, Manhattan now bears the highest concentration of homelessness in the entire city. You don't need to go far to see it. 10 meters, 1 block. That's all it takes to witness what New York has tried to hide. Entire stretches like West 39th between 9th and 10th have transformed into rows of tents, abandoned parking lots, dim alleyways in Hell's Kitchen, and even Penn Station are now home to the displaced. And when the sun goes down, the contrast becomes unbearable. The neon glow of Midtown can't reach the shadows where desperation lives. What used to feel like the city of tomorrow now feels like something out of a post-apocalyptic film. Behind the billboards, tension simmers, poverty deepens, violence lurks, and hopelessness spreads like rot. Even law enforcement hesitates. "We don't go down there anymore," admitted one officer. His words were blunt but honest. Walking into certain alleys isn't policing, it's a gamble. How can pockets of a city with billionaire penthouses and a global stock market become no-go zones? There's no simple fix. The scale of the crisis stretches far beyond shelters. It demands housing, mental health services, job programs, long-term care, real solutions, not photo ops. And still, New York tries, piece by piece, neighborhood by neighborhood, but the process is slow and the damage moves fast. So here's the question we can't keep avoiding. If even Manhattan, the economic engine and crown jewel of the nation, can't protect its most vulnerable, then what does that say about the rest of us? Just a few years ago, if you lived in New York, the numbers you're seeing today would have felt like science fiction. Now, a casual breakfast might set you back $20. A dozen eggs can cost as much as lunch at a mid-tier restaurant. Milk is nearly double what it used to be, and bread, plain old bread, can sometimes cost more than what many people earn in an hour. According to recent figures from Bloomberg and Numbeo, New York City now holds the crown for the most expensive place to live in the United States, outranking even San Francisco, LA, and Washington, D.C. The spike in food costs alone has been staggering, rising anywhere from 75% to nearly 90% since the pandemic. But for those living on a fixed income, the numbers haven't kept pace. Retirees relying on Social Security have seen their benefits inch upward by less than 25% during that same time. That math doesn't add up. For older New Yorkers, just the basics, groceries, medicine. A Metro card now eat up between $1,200 and $1,500 each month. And that's before you even talk about rent. These days, trying to grow old in New York isn't just difficult, it feels like being fined for having memories. Staying here has become a luxury few can afford. But it's not just the cost of food pushing people to the brink, it's housing. The rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan has climbed past $4,000 a month. Federal guidelines say you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing, but more than 40% of New Yorkers now spend half their income just to stay indoors. And for many, that's a fight they're slowly losing. According to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, for every 100 low-income renters in the city, there are only 36 units they can realistically afford. That means more than two-thirds are left to fend for themselves, often forced onto the streets or packed into unstable, unsafe arrangements. So what does someone do when their monthly income is less than $1,800 and the cost of simply surviving here is double that? This isn't just about retirees scraping by. New York is also home to thousands of children growing up without beds, without classrooms, without certainty. For them, survival starts before kindergarten. Charity lines become their daily routine. They learn to read faces instead of books, especially the kind that look away. We have to face it. Homelessness in New York isn't just a crisis for the poorest anymore. It's now knocking on the doors of the working class, the middle class, even those who thought they were safe. Because when everything food, rent, transport, healthcare climbs higher each month while your income stands still, you don't need a disaster to lose it all. Just one wrong turn, one medical emergency, one missed paycheck. And now the very people who helped build this city, who carried it through blackouts and blizzards, through COVID and 9/11 are the ones being left behind. At this point, what more do we need to see before we finally admit it? New York is in crisis, and it's not just statistics, it's people. For generations, New York has been the beacon at the end of the tunnel, the place people imagined when they dreamed of freedom, of safety, of starting over. It stood as the city of second chances, where the promise of the American dream felt just within reach. But now, that promise is buckling under the weight of reality. In times of crisis, people still come not just from across the southern border, but from every corner of the world, from Venezuela, Haiti, and the Middle East, from Canada, from Florida, Texas, and even other struggling parts of California. They come because they believe somehow that New York still has room for hope. But hope has become hard to hold on to here. In just 2 years, the city has seen more than 175,000 asylum seekers and migrants arrive, according to city records. The system, already overstretched, is now operating on fumes. What was once a sanctuary now feels like a triage unit where the question isn't, can we help, but who do we help first? Tents have replaced housing. Lobbies and sidewalks have become waiting rooms for relief that may never come. Each night feels like a lottery, where some are handed a cot in a temporary shelter, and others are left to face the cold curve alone. New York City has spent more than $2 billion in a single year trying to manage the surge offering food, shelter, and basic health care. But this is no longer just a matter of dollars. It's a matter of bandwidth, of compassion hitting its breaking point. And for many newcomers, the dream they chase dissolves almost instantly. They arrive with no legal documentation, no work permits, no safety nets. They end up living in hotels that were never meant to be long-term homes, or packed into shelters that have been overwhelmed for years. Some sleep on the streets within days of landing here, lost in a sea of confusion, forgotten by a system already drowning. As this humanitarian emergency grows, so does the tension. Longtime New Yorkers feel the squeeze. Some believe they're being pushed aside, that scarce resources are going to newcomers while their own needs go unmet. Affordable housing, already rare, feels like it's vanishing. Social services are stretched so thin that even locals struggle to access help. And resentment begins to fester, aimed not just at the system, but at the strangers who arrived looking for the same chance they once had. On the other side, migrants feel invisible, unwanted, abandoned by a city that greeted them with open arms, only to let them fall through the cracks. And so the divide widens. This is no longer just a housing problem or a budget crisis, it's an identity crisis. If New York is the mirror of America, what it reflects now is uncomfortable. A country that built its name on welcome signs and open doors, now wondering if it has room to keep that promise alive. What happens when the land of opportunity runs out of space? When the Statue of Liberty stands tall but no longer has the hands to catch the tired and poor it once vowed to embrace? That's the question echoing through the streets of New York today. And the answer, for many, is starting to sound like silence. There was a time when being middle class in America meant security. It meant stability. You worked hard, maybe even held down 2 jobs, paid your taxes, owned a modest home in the suburbs, bought groceries on Sundays, and raised your kids with the hope that they'd do even better than you. The middle class wasn't just a demographic, it was the backbone of the American promise. But in today's New York, that backbone is starting to fracture. Here, even if you work full-time, hold a college degree, and live within your means, even if you do everything right, you can still find yourself teetering on the edge of homelessness. Why? Because no normal salary can keep up with how fast this city is slipping into the realm of the unaffordable. A 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan now costs more than $4,000 a month. For a family of 4 to live modestly, not lavishly, they need between $8,000 and $10,000 after taxes, just to stay afloat. That number feels like a cruel joke to many professionals. And it takes only one small crack for the entire foundation to crumble a cut in work hours, an emergency room visit, or a layoff that comes without warning. In less than a week, a family can go from comfortable to desperate. According to recent data from the Pew Research Center, America's middle class has shrunk by nearly 11% over the last 2 decades. But in New York, the decline is even steeper, faster, and far more visible. People who once held keys to their own homes are now moving in with extended family. renting tiny rooms or living in aging apartment blocks, long past their prime. Some sleep in their cars, still dressed for office jobs in Midtown, still showing up for work each morning while living one step away from disaster. The middle class used to be the buffer, the space between wealth and poverty, between thriving and surviving. But now that space is thinning, and as it disappears, so does the glue that holds this city together. No more cushions, no more room for error, and worst of all, no safety net to fall back on. This is what happens when the people who work the hardest, who power the subways, run the schools, keep the lights on, are the same ones being pushed out. They're not poor enough to qualify for assistance, but they're no longer secure enough to call themselves stable. They're trapped in a gray zone that no policy seems to acknowledge. New York used to represent possibility, a city where anyone could rise if they had the drive. But when the cost of opportunity becomes too steep, it stops being an opportunity at all. It becomes a privilege, a ticket reserved only for those who can afford the price of admission. And the question that looms over the skyline now is this: how long can a city survive if the very people who keep it alive can no longer afford to stay? In New York City, you can walk past them every single day and never learn their names, not because they're hiding, but because they've faded into the background, quietly erased by a city that no longer has room for its most vulnerable. They are the ones who've fallen through the cracks, not out of failure, but because the system stopped catching people a long time ago. Take Lydia. She's 78 years old. She's been without a home for more than 4 decades. Once upon a time, she lived in a rent-controlled apartment. It wasn't much, but it was hers until the person whose name was on the lease moved out. Evicted without mercy, Lydia found herself out on the streets, and she's been there ever since. She qualified for disability benefits years ago, but the paperwork was never processed. There was no advocate, no lawyer, no official who bothered to take her side. She has no door to lock, no address to put on a form, no voice loud enough to cut through the bureaucracy. "Wherever I go, I don't belong," she says. "I'm a square peg in a round wall." Lydia has stopped hoping for more. These days, she doesn't dream, she simply survives. Then there's Lisa, just a teenager, an age when most are planning their futures, filling out college applications, and arguing over prom dresses. Lisa, instead, is sleeping on the sidewalk near a church because that's where she feels the least unsafe. She ended up here after tensions with her foster family reached a breaking point. When asked what she wishes for, she doesn't talk about fame or fortune. She just says, "I wish I had a place to stay. I wish people were kind. I wish there was no war." There's a disarming innocence in her voice, the kind that makes the injustice hit harder. Lisa still believes in goodness even when the world has given her every reason not to. And sometimes it's that belief, that stubborn kindness, that makes the cruelty of life feel even more unbearable. And then there's Richard, once a husband, once employed, once stable. His life unraveled after his wife got sick. Medical bills piled up, support systems crumbled, and he lost everything, including his home. He tried to get into a shelter, but the conditions were worse than the streets. Still, he hasn't given up entirely. He's just looking for 2 weeks of stability, a place to sleep, somewhere to shower, a locker for his few remaining belongings, just enough to get back on his feet. "I'm not a deadbeat," Richard says. "I just couldn't keep up." He knows what it's like to be invisible. He knows how people look at you differently when you're sitting on the ground. Not like a person, but like a warning, a ghost of a life that could have been theirs. "As soon as you sit down out here, you see it in their eyes," he says. "They stop seeing you." And that might be the deepest wound of all, not the hunger, not the cold, but the gaze that pretends you don't exist. Lydia, Lisa, Richard. They are not isolated tragedies. They're not outliers anymore. They are a growing part of the population. People who once had homes, jobs, families now reduced to shadows on the sidewalk, trying to stay out of sight. Not because they're ashamed, but because society has taught them they don't belong in view. Homelessness in New York isn't a distant problem anymore. It isn't someone else's issue. It's the story of a neighbor who missed a paycheck, a single mom who fled domestic violence, a young person with no safety net. It's a reality that can arrive in an instant with one medical emergency, one job layoff, one bad twist of fate. So the question we should be asking isn't, where did they go? It's, why didn't we notice when they started to fall? Because when the heart of a city like New York begins to falter, when it beats slower, weaker, the whole body is at risk. And if we keep ignoring the pain at our feet, we'll wake up one day to find we no longer recognize the place we once called home. New York isn't just a city, it's a symbol. For decades, it stood as the launchpad of ambition, where stories began, where possibilities felt infinite. But today, that same cityscape is slowly turning into a graveyard of broken promises. You step out of the subway in Midtown, walk past the glass towers glinting with corporate success, and then there it is, a figure curled up next to a ventilation grate, hidden in plain sight. You don't need a statistic to tell you inequality is alive and well. It's etched into the concrete. It breathes beneath the neon lights. What kind of future are we building when the very people who keep this city running can no longer afford to live in it? The elderly, worn down by time, find themselves racing against a market that no longer has room for them. Workers juggling 2 or even 3 jobs still can't scrape together enough for rent. Immigrants who arrived with hope and resilience are stuck in an endless maze of red tape, and children are growing up without a pillow to call their own. A city cannot call itself successful if its success is hoarded at the top. It cannot claim greatness when the view from a penthouse window blocks out the hunger on the street below. When benches become beds, when parks turn into encampments, when subway stations become the final resting place of someone's life story, we have to stop and ask, what exactly is New York leading in? Because it is leading, but perhaps it's leading the nation in forgetting its people. Yes, government officials will point to spreadsheets. Committees will talk about funding. Press releases will mention initiatives. But when tens of thousands of people lie awake outside every night, when the eyes of homeless children flicker between car headlights in rush hour traffic, the issue stops being about money and starts being about morality. New York once promised a fair shot to anyone, no matter your background, your name, or where you came from. But if this city, of all places, no longer has room for those who built it, those who served it, those who believed in it, what does that say about the future of the rest of the country? There are things you simply won't see from the 80th floor of a high-rise. You won't see the man silently shivering under a plastic tarp in the rain. You won't hear the woman choosing between insulin and dinner. You won't feel the cold metal of a bench pressed against the back of a child who's trying to sleep. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. It's all happening right beneath the scaffolding of wealth, right below the LED screens flashing with tomorrow's dreams. Maybe the American dream still lives in New York, but if so, it's locked behind doors most people don't even get close enough to knock on. This isn't about judgment. This video isn't trying to shock or shame. It's a mirror showing a reflection we don't like to look at. But sometimes the truths we turn away from are the ones we most need to face. So, what do you see when you walk through New York? What do you think when you pass by someone who's been left behind? Let us know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe if this video gave you something to think about. And stay tuned, because these stories deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.